Hello and welcome to another episode of Coaching Outdoors. We're very excited, Anna Marie and myself, to head over to Portugal, just north of Lisbon. And we are very pleased to have as a guest with us today is Joao Perre Viana. And he's going to correct me if I've not got that quite right. And Joao is joining us. He's the co-founder of Walking Mentorship, and has been doing that now for a good few number of years. He's an author and he is a podcaster, and I'm going to let him introduce himself in a minute, but we're very excited to have you on today. And if you'd like to just introduce yourself in a few brief sentences, and then we can dive into some more detail as we go through the podcast today. So welcome.
Well, thank you very much, Paul. Thank you very much, Anna Marie. It's really a pleasure, and thank you very much for having me on your podcast. What can I say? Who is João? Well, I guess I think I was born Portuguese, but turned into a citizen of the world because what life somehow gave me along the journey. I'm a lawyer that I think turned into a manager, that turned into a mentor. I was born in Portugal. Actually, I was born in Lisbon, in the capital. But at a very early age, I think I understood that the world was a very interesting place to discover. And I think my curiosity somehow led the way. And in a nutshell, I think I'm, how can I say, I'm a walkaholic, because honestly speaking, it's something that I do since I remember to be myself, and I continue to do so, mainly walking with other people, side by side, and trying every day to get one step closer to the best version of ourselves. So that's me.
Oh, there's just a couple of phrases there that have totally captured my attention. The citizen of the world piece really resonates, and I hope it does with our listeners. We've got people from all around the world listening in. And I've not heard of the walkaholic. I mean, I think workaholic is something that's bandied around quite a lot, but walkaholic, I do like your take on that. That is brilliant. And this is a question we ask all our guests, just to set the scene. And it's an invitation to step back in time and share what is your earliest memory of being outdoors, and why do you enjoy being outside so much?
Well, it's a very good question. And I think going back in time, I think I need to probably rewind to when I was probably 6 years old. I think, as far as I remember, that's when I joined the Boy Scouts at the time. And it was an extraordinary experience because it taught me very important lessons. From one side, the harmony between man and nature, the fundamentals actually of environmentalism. I think we didn't even use the word at the time, but we understood that that was so important to preserve our planet and our own nature, because somehow it became obvious that what you do to the planet, you do to yourself. And so at that very early age, I would say that I kind of felt that being outdoors was actually being indoors. And that's the feeling I always have, because when I open the door every morning, which I usually do around 6 o'clock, 6:30 in the morning, and I go for my first walk, I don't have a feeling I'm going outside. Actually, the feeling I have is that I'm going inside. And then, yes, at a certain point, I need to return home within these four walls. So I think every day somehow is an opportunity to develop what I can call maybe my love and appreciation for our planet. Yes, and I think that that's where everything started, when you are literally raised spending days and time outdoors. And there's one thing I remember actually from these very first early years in the Boy Scouts, that with the chief, the guy that was responsible for our group, he always told us that you should only leave two things behind when you go out and you camp or you are in nature. And one thing is to say thank you to the people that live there, and the second thing is just leave it cleaner than when you find it, or when you arrived. So these two things, I think they have been on my mind ever since, because it's kind of the beginning of understanding the world as a whole. Because if you are a guest, you should actually say thank you all the time, wherever you go through. And if you actually leave it cleaner, you leave it better. And I guess that can apply to anything. I mean, education, work, relationships, and even there are times that probably the way to make it better is just be silent. Actually, that's also something I learned with nature. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, that's Joao, that's so lovely. I mean, there's so much gosh, for our listeners and watchers to sort of hear there. I mean, going from the 6-year-old Boy Scout, just preserving the planet, that comment that you were just bringing us to, that saying, that we what we do to the planet, we do to ourselves. And we talk a lot on the series about that whole system. We're part of the system, that where we see the planet and ourselves as one. And you just summed that up beautifully in that sentence. That and I love this concept where it's I can see we're going to have some great thinking coming up today with this whole, when I go outdoors, I'm actually going indoors. This whole reversal of we're meant to be out there. That's where we should be, and we were always meant to be there. And I love that. And it's really interesting as well. You're bringing in that guest thing of the chief scout said to you, we say thank you to the people who live there. And perhaps that's not always something that in this question, we've brought out, that there are people living within certain areas who become the carers of that environment. And maybe we should, thank them for being a guest in that, and that they're the carer of that particular area. That's beautiful, beautiful thoughts. I really love that. That's great. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you from this 6-year-old Boy Scout, and I'm going to ask you if you could briefly share with our listeners and take us through that career line that gets you to be the citizen of the world that's sitting and we're all listening to today. So I don't know if you could just take us on, how did we go from 6-year-old and up to where we are today?
Well, I think that every time I discovered something new, my view of the world expanded. So I think this is really the key point, because every new trip, every new acquaintance, or maybe a culture that I got in contact with, it made my life more colorful and interesting. But nevertheless, obviously, there are some milestones that they stand out, because they worked a little bit like, how to say, like a jumping mattress for me. It's like, I touched that, and suddenly when I woke up, I was, a few miles up in the air. So at the age of 17, I was very curious about what was in the other side of the ocean, because I was born and I spent most of my youth right in front of the Atlantic Ocean in Portugal. And it was not rare to go there, either in the morning or in the evenings, and look at the ocean. And I was always thinking, what's on the other side? How far it will take me to get there. And at the age of 17, I became an exchange student in Montana, in the US. And somehow the world opened up in front of me like a window. And when I went through that window, so living in the shoes of another culture, I kind of took this giant step outside my mind, and I never returned. So that's a little bit the feeling I had, even if at the time I was not aware of that. And this was really a life-changing event, because I learned that the most important thing is to choose what you want to keep from any life event, either the things you like or the things you don't like. And I actually decided to keep what is good. And the rest, I believe I already forgotten. So that's something I've been trying to do all the time. And after, having this taste, let's say, of the other, which in the end of the day, it's just you, but speaks a different language and maybe they eat different food, but I couldn't stop. So later on, I returned to Europe. I moved to Belgium to continue my studies. I stayed working in the region. Then I did my first, let's say, serious management assignment in Central Asia. So I lived in Kazakhstan, which again was another giant leap and opening another window. Later on, I did a restructuring in Africa. All of this somehow have shown me that there's kind of a pattern. At least I can see this pattern in my life. Every time I travel, I place myself in a position to change profoundly. And by doing that, I change the way I see the world. As a consequence, I change deeply who I am. So I think that all this sequence of events definitely turned me into a citizen of the world, I guess, by choice. But probably nothing beats the last 8 years of my life. When I had the chance to walk side by side with hundreds of people from all backgrounds and nationalities, which somehow confirms that once you open yourself to others, you become a citizen of the world. So I think that's the reason why I claim that citizenship.
And it's such an important citizenship, particularly set against the backdrop of social, economic, political complexities within which we inhabit at this moment in time. And undoubtedly, the remainder of the 21st century was just going to get even more so. So it is strongly needed, this mindset. And getting specific now, really diving into your business, Walking Mentorship. Where did that concept come from, and then how has it evolved over the last 8 years?
Well, I recall my first pilgrimage in 1993. I had no idea it was a pilgrimage, and honestly, I was inside a youth group, and they fooled me well, because they promised that will be, so much fun and party, and actually in the end was slightly different. It was a lot of fun, but just totally different type of party. And this triggered my curiosity for two things: long walks. I mean, I was always used to walk, but one thing is to walk for a couple of days, another thing is to walk for a few weeks. There's a difference here. And the other thing was the spiritual dimension of some special places. So these two things together, they trigger something in me. So a few years later, and the stroll, I think, of about 800 kilometers with a friend and a notebook and 10 questions to reflect, because that's all I got from this friend of mine. He said, look, I'm going to ask you, buy a notebook, empty pages. I'm going to give you 10 questions and 800 kilometers in front of you to think about those answers, or those questions and those answers. So this kind of confirmed to me there's something there deep as well, and worth it to explore. At the end of that journey, I was a different person. And I believe I was a better person. Not only different. And I thought that if I could only find a way to share this experience with other people. But at the time, I probably was 20 years old. I had no idea how to do it. So I once learned from a very special person in my family, saying that when you have such a beautiful thought, such a beautiful idea, keep it. keep it in a good place, like a gentle candle. Imagine that you cannot really put it out because it might just be blown away by wind. So I kept it I don't know where, inside of myself and my mind. And the following 20 years, I kept this vision, I would say, in a very special place. And on and off, I added new insights to. So actually, I think this light kept on growing little by little. So I think I never did anything for 20 years in my life. So this is probably the only thing I really kept it in such a way. And actually, every time I was traveling, I noticed that something was added to the story. And when I turned 40, so imagine, so you just, kind of fast forward 20 years, I went on another journey. This time I went alone. And I basically spent the whole journey just thinking about if it would be possible, if it would be the right time, and how I could turn this gentle, very small idea into something. And what I understood, I think more clear than ever, is that this was probably the reason why I'm here in this world, in this planet, in this life. You can call it purpose. I'm not sure we need to label it as such. But at that moment, I understood very clearly that I needed to start testing this idea, and I needed to go from concept to action. Otherwise, it will never go from being just an idea. So, picking up on the 3 F's, family, friends, and fools, I remember perfectly the day I wrote that email. I think I invited maybe 30, 40 people, and with a very simple invitation. I need 1 week of your time, of your life. I mean, this is a big request. And all I ask you, and then I put between brackets, if you survive, it's to give me a thorough and detailed feedback about the experience. It's pretty frightening, this invitation. And so for about 1 year, I continued to work as a manager, and mainly doing restructurings, because that's what I've done pretty much in my career in the corporate world. I tested this pilot. So I was taking small groups of friends, fools, and some family as well, on these 5, 6, 7 days walks, usually on routes that I knew well. So I was more or less acquainted with some of the variables, but soon I understood that that was just a fallacy. Honestly, all the variables, the new ones, were just popping up all the time. And it was incredible, because in the end, I understood clearly that certain things you shouldn't do. And I mean, and this is a great way to learn. But people actually point me away. And there was one thing that always came very clearly. This is you. Whatever you are doing here, this is you 100%. So somehow this confirmed a little bit that I was in the right track, something that I aspired for many years. And I had to be patient, wait, and learn, because during these 20 years, I gained experience. I lived life. I was in different countries. I explored everything by walking, actually. So I think I was practicing even without knowing. And I was mentoring so many people that worked with me without ever even, calling myself a mentor. So I guess that's probably a very natural way to understand, if this is in your nature. And for the first 4 years, I think I worked alone, because I was trying to learn as fast as I can. And honestly, if you want to go fast, go alone, because you are making so many mistakes. Your mind changes between morning, afternoon, and evening 20 times. I don't think anyone can stand, honestly, it's not even fair to have anyone on a ride like this. But once I understood that I wanted to go far, then everything changed, because I was joined by an incredible human being, Nuno Santos Fernandes, which, by the way, he happened to be a participant in one of the first pilots, and he survived. And in 2019, he became my partner. So this sequence, I would say, that has created the conditions, especially in the last 4 years, to continually or gradually, I would say, continue to developing the programs, reaching different countries, onboarding new mentors, because at this stage, it's really amazing to collaborate with different people from different cultures, different languages, And again, I guess I'm just trying to be faithful to this concept of being a citizen of the world. I mean, that's the way we look at things, or especially I look at things, and being always available to be flexible and open to enjoy probably the ultimate goal of our lives, which is the journey. So that's pretty much it.
Wow, that is just so phenomenal. Thank you so much for talking us and walking us through that, Joao. It was, and you know what struck me is, you're right, is that life is, it's just, you're on this huge journey, and what came to me in my head was, I was listening to you, was this, that it's almost like, you know, sometimes we go and do a degree for 3 years, or a you know, professori kind of for 5 or whatever. You've actually been on this training and this learning for sort of 35, 40 years to be in this place. And as you say, whether we label it as passion, purpose, whatever, it doesn't matter. The energy that comes out of your voice is just phenomenal, of how you've discovered this yourself. And I can imagine those 20 mind thought changes through a day walking on your own. It's just such a beautiful image to see you almost co-creating it with yourself, and maybe even nature helping you with that co-creation along the way. That's what a lovely thought to. And one of the things we'd like to just touch on and draw out from that amazing journey and where you are now is just drawing out, many of our listeners, watchers are coaches, professional, trained coaching, you know, practitioners. We've not really delved so much into mentorship, and this word that is walking mentorship. Could you just elaborate and expand that out for us a little bit, of how you see that mentorship works, and maybe some of those differences, perhaps? Is that, yeah?
Well, it's a great question, Paul, and probably as many answers as coaches and mentors. I mean, that's my opinion.
Yeah, sure.
I have to say that I'm not a coach. I know very little about coaching, so most likely what I'm going to say next is full of my own mistakes and prejudice. But anyway, I do believe that coaching and mentoring can look very similar. I mean, that's my take. And why do I say they look very similar? Because they both dedicate to develop the person and the individual. And in this sense, there is kind of a common path. But at the same time, I think both build around a relationship. I think there are defined roles in coaching and mentoring. And actually, I think the success somehow requires many of the same communication and interpersonal skills. So these are the similarities, let's put it this way. But I think they are not the same thing. And mainly because of what I've learned along the way, and talking with many coaches. Because, by the way, in the very first years, and still now, many of the people that look for our immersive programs, they are coaches. So I guess I learned because I always asked many questions. And one thing that somehow stands out is the duration. Because I believe that coaching somehow tends to be kind of a short-term relation. I mean, you have an objective and you achieve it. And somehow what I've seen is that mentoring tends to be more of a long-term. When I look back, people that I've been mentoring for 8, 9 years. And I think that there's a slightly difference here. I think the purpose as well, because I noticed that there is in coaching, there is a good focus on improving performance. And this is a great thing, because sometimes you really need to, you know, increase some of those skills that will reflect on performance. But I think mentoring probably tends to be a bit more broad in terms of personal development. And the results or the outcomes, I would say, usually are more broadened as well, and not with so like, say, observable changes when you are looking into performance. Because I think this is also related with the ownership of the process. I mean, I think in mentoring, it probably cannot be in another way. The process is all driven by the mentee, and the question is super simple. In our programs, our first question is exactly, what is your focus question for the program? So the moment you answer that, everything evolves around you and you drive the process. And I think the style, and maybe here I'm talking more about walking mentorship in particular, the style is very informal, because as you can imagine, we use backpacks and walking boots and sticks, and it's as, I don't know, in my humble opinion, I think this is a tremendous equalizer. And why do I call it like that? Because we work with individuals, but we also work with corporations. We have different programs. But whatever you are doing, after 1-2 hours of walking together, you cannot understand who is who in terms of hierarchy or position within the company, because everyone is just a person. And this is absolutely wonderful. And again, I'm not trying to avoid the answer, but I think this is quite a difference, because it puts you in a place, it puts you in a situation that actually you focus only on the essentials. There is nothing else there, because I can assure you, after 25 kilometers, my feet hurt, and probably yours as well. It doesn't really matter your level of evolution, your development, your capacity and skills of doing this and that. And in that sense, I once heard this explanation that I use it quite often to describe what we do in the walking mentorship. I believe there is a museum that at the entrance of the museum, you are asked to grab a rope, which is very strange, because usually that's not what you receive at the entrance of a museum. This is the pre-chamber. And once you enter the museum, you understand immediately why you need a rope, because the whole museum is dark. There is no light inside. And the only way for you to go from the beginning until the end, let's say in a more safer way, it's to keep your hand on the rope. Of course, you can leave it, right? You probably can find many ways to get to the exit, because everything is through audio. And I think that quite often this is exactly what we do. We are a rope. You can decide to keep your hand there. Once in a while, you might take it away because you want to rest or you want to change hands. But somehow, through this process, which is elevated by nature and walking, because in the end of the day, this is what it is mentoring elevated by walking and nature. We take you through a process that the chances for you to reach the exit where you want to, get through are extremely high. In the end of the day, it's your decision. It's always your decision. I mean, you can boycott the process within yourself, which we see sometimes. Maybe it's not the right time yet to do that work, internal work, or maybe that's what you can do at the moment. And that might be just fine. So a very long answer to tell you, I believe there's few differences, but both approaches are absolutely beautiful, and they both contribute to develop the person, the individual. So beautiful explanations, I would say, to reach the same goal.
And it is a complex one, and at the end of the day, it's a title, it's a label. Are you a coach? Are you a mentor? What's your definition of it? What's your interpretation of it? And a lot of the skills do cross over. And I think there's also a piece around the cultural lens as well, where you've trained, whether it's more American, whether it's more Europe centered, and sometimes more within the business context. I work with a lot of clients as a coach, and they have a business mentor at the same time, and that again is a very different construct. So I think it's almost just, and we were so keen to have you on the podcast to share your thoughts working within the outdoor space, but then this mentorship label and title, and how did you come to that? And I think it's almost the takeaway for the listeners is to really have that affiliation of who are you, as a coach, as a mentor? How does that align with your identity, your personality, your story? And you know, for me, I call myself a performance coach, though actually for me, my interpretation of performance, for example, is far beyond the classic notion, and it does have a bigger, broader physical, emotional, psychological, even spiritual dimension. How do you show up in life? How do you really live your life with purpose, which is totally divorced from, you know, what a lot of businesses would maybe describe it as. So anyway, if you could take us on a journey, a virtual journey, a short virtual journey, because I totally get your programs run over days, and unfortunately we haven't got that amount of time, but if you could take us on a snapshot journey of like one of your programs, like what happens, and if there's any opportunity to share, I don't know, maybe a client story with confidentiality respected, of course, that would just be interesting to get that insight.
Absolutely. And thank you for what you just said. Well, all our programs, they follow the same structure. Either they are a one-day program, for instance, for companies, for corporations, because companies usually don't allow themselves to be away more than a day or so. I don't know, they are afraid that something will collapse back in the office. But usually the programs are much shorter for obvious reasons. And individual programs or group programs usually are immersive, so 7-8 days. But they all follow the same structure. So we have 4 moments in our methodology, which seem to be pretty, I would say, pretty obvious, to be honest. I don't think this is rocket science. I think they are just obvious and they make sense. And the first moment in any of our programs, it's about slowing down. And the reason is simple. We are just living too fast our lives. And it's very hard. And it's becoming harder and harder to think properly. So if we don't slow down, we just cannot do the thinking. And here, I believe that walking is the best ally, because I can assure you that whatever are your levels of stress, you know, after 5, 10, 15, 20 kilometers, they start going down because they stay on the road, they stay there. And suddenly nature around you and all these incredible, you know, frequencies that are there, which by the way are not in the cities at the same level, but the nature frequencies, they start tuning you into the right frequency or dimension. Once you start slowing down, which by the way, it's a process, it's the first moment, but this moment will continue throughout the whole program because you will continuously slow down throughout the program. We go into a second moment, which is about reconnecting. And here reconnecting is about obviously reconnecting with yourself, but reconnecting with the ones around you, and not necessarily only the people that are maybe there on the program with you. Quite often, we understand that people start reconnecting with their loved ones, family and friends, and maybe people they haven't talked for a long time. And why? Simple, because once you start slowing down, what is essential comes to the surface. And usually essential it's very few things. We don't have many essential things in life. It's a little bit like our backpack and the exercise we do in the beginning, which is to build your backpack as your life. So everything you need to put inside, you have to carry. If you put too many things, it's too heavy. You have to quit certain things. And if you don't put enough, you might miss something along the way. So this metaphor, let's say, we usually do it in the beginning of the program. Once you kind of keep slowing down and start this process of reconnecting, you can enter the third moment, which is about gaining perspective. So this is a little bit of time traveling and visioning, because you understand your current situation, but you also, once you do kind of a zoom out from your current moment, you understand there are things that probably you want to change, that you would like to have different in the near future. And here, gaining perspective, it's really about building, even if it's a very simple thing, but it's about building your idea of an ideal future. And when I say ideal future, something very tangible, very concrete. And again, think that the beginning of the program is always about your focus question. What is your focus question? And usually what we see is that there is a connection between your ideal future and the answer for this focus question. Usually there is a connection here. And we finalized in the fourth moment, which for me is the most important, because it seems the easiest, but this is definitely where devil lies, because it's the detail of the action. So we finish all our programs focusing on how to take action. So actually it's to build up either a long, short, deeper, or not so deep action plan that you can take it and put it in your agenda in the very next day. Because this is the big difference between having great insights and again, why this exists on the program. It's very simple, because many extraordinary experiences I had in my life, usually walking or traveling, I had incredible insights, but I did not have the right tools to capture those insights and turn them into action. And that's very frustrating, because this will fade for sure. It takes maybe a few days, weeks, months. Okay, you have the pictures, maybe the videos, but it's not the same thing. While if you take note of those things in the moment when you are so close to your essence, so close to what is important, it becomes easier to continue to carry that flame, throughout the days, and until you reach a point in life that you understand that these things are either already accomplished or you miss them and you have some learnings to take away and you go back to, step one. Because I think that this is the eternal, let's say, process of our lives. We are constantly moving, hopefully evolving, developing, improving, but we are made of cycles. So that's the reason why the methodology is used like that. And as I said, in a one-day program, of course, the level of depth is slightly different. Or if you take either alone, individually, or in a group for 7-8 days. More than that, we consider to do it, but it's very difficult in today's world to take more than a week or so for yourself. Maybe in different moments of life or specific moments of life, it's possible, but generally speaking, it's very difficult to do. So we keep somehow with the learnings that we collect, that these models, these formats, somehow this impossible to implement.
Wow, that's great. I love it. And there's some questions. I'm full of questions for some of that. So Joel, I mean, through a 1-day or a week program, people will be moving through those 4 stages at slightly different paces. I mean, you were saying how flexible, so that somebody may stay with stage 2, reconnecting, and other people may have already moved into visioning and perspective. Is that the case, or?
Well, it's a possibility, Paul. Mm-hmm. What we try to do, and here I think that mentoring plays a role, is through sharing experience and stories, things that we've seen, and we've seen a lot. The last time we count, I think was already some time ago, we noticed that we walked with more than 1,500 people over the last 8 years. So there is really a good amount of stories to be shared and say, look, if you do in such a way, this might be the outcome. But if you do in this way, this might be the outcome. Now, it's up to you to decide. So if you think that it's important for you to stay in a certain moment of the program, and maybe what seems to be delaying something, it's not delaying, it's just what is possible. But I have an example. I give an example. Some not so long ago, I did what we call signature program. So I walk with one person only for an immersive week. And this is the person that I walked before in previous years. So we know each other very well. And it never happened to me, honestly. So again, it proves we are always learning. I don't know anything, literally. So on the very first day of the program, we met and we start the program, and I brought the survival kit. So this is the name of the methodology. So it's a booklet. I gave it to my fellow walker and say, look, here we are again. So I asked him to bring the survival kit from previous years so we could, somehow connect. He said, yeah, I'll bring the survival kit. But the first moment he looked at survival kit, he looked at me and said, look, today I'm not ready to do this. So let's leave it aside, have a nice meal, a nice conversation. I said, okay, accept, be flexible, we'll do it tomorrow. So the next day at breakfast, I brought again, the topic and say, hey, where is the survival kit? Let's go, let's start. And he looked at me very peaceful and say, you know what? There is just no way this week we're going to do the survival kit. And I thought, oh, exactly. What shall we do now? I mean, this is not in the plan. But then you understand, and I think this answers your question, Paul, because this is the moment that, I've been teaching for many, many years. And there was a point in time that I quit the slide decks. And this was like the most liberating moment of my life. I said, wow, I can teach just in front of the students, just myself. I don't need any support because it's here. Finally, after 20 years, finally I can teach and or at least think that I can do it. And that's what happened exactly during this week. I felt, wow, how am I going to do this? But then it was kind of a leap of faith. I said, look, but maybe you can do it. And this will be exactly the mentoring program this person needs at this moment.
That's right.
So I guess all possibilities are available, but it's important that somehow your experience will allow you to take the best route so that the objective for this person, it's still the key element of the whole program. It's not about me, it's not about us as mentors, it's about the person. And taking that into consideration, I think that there are as many mentoring programs as there are people in the world.
Yeah. And what I love is about that answer, and thank you so much for such a great, is that we have to learn as mentors or coaches. We sometimes become the student, and not to be frightened to take something from. I mean, I always say to myself, for every person I meet in life, they leave something with me and I leave something with them. And there's always that transference of projection that we have between us as we walk equally side by side. And I think your story there, that just sums that up so beautifully. It's amazing. That's such a great answer. And as you say, not being frightened to leave the PowerPoint, the decks, and just freestyle it. So that's fantastic. And so we're just moving it. We're going to jump in straight into. We are always fascinated to hear our guests and published work that they've done, and we love the name of this is that your book, November 22, I believe, I think it was published, and it's Don't Count the Kilometers, but Make the Kilometers Count. And could you expand and clearly it's got some of the richness of the stuff you've been sharing with us, but perhaps could you just tell us a little bit about that? And
well, absolutely, and thank you for your comment. I mean, the title is as honest as it can be, because I've learned that every time you try to count the kilometers, and actually every time you share with a person or a group how many kilometers are left, you are killing that person, literally. It's a little bit like our life, the inspiration comes from this idea. Would you like to know exactly the day, the hour when you will die? Most people answer the same, no. Well, then don't count the kilometers. Make the kilometers count, because it's really about the journey. And what I notice is that this book took maybe 6 years to write, because I start the first chapters when I start the first pilot groups. It was not a group, it was not meant to be a book, it was just meant to be a diary where I was keeping the learnings. And as I went along, I understood that I was the recipient of so many incredible stories that would be very unfair if I would keep them for myself, because honestly, they are not mine. I was just keeping them together and tie them together. So what I tried was to explain how the whole methodology was developed over the years, what was learned somehow, and illustrate that always with pictures and actually with stories. So all I guess, except for 2 names that are real, because I really wanted these people to be portrayed as such, but all the other names are fictional. But all the stories, obviously, striping away nationalities and other elements, but all the stories are absolutely real. at least the way I saw them, okay? Because there's always this element. This is the way I perceive them, and I share this story. So this book, Don't Count the Kilometers, it's somehow is a kind of instructional manual, because I deliver in a way that any person can pick up that book, open the door, and go for a walk. And one of our programs, it's even written there in detail, where to stop, where to sleep, where to do the exercise. So the idea is that all of this was given to me freely, and I should actually just make it available as such, because other people will take it from the moment I stop, and they will evolve, they will develop further. And this is to be absolutely aligned and honest with my own purpose in life. I mean, in the beginning, you mentioned our business. I was going to say something, but then I bite my tongue. But I think this is the right time. We never call it such. It is indeed a service that we want to make it as sustainable as possible, because we today have other people working with us, and we want it to be sustainable for everybody. I really have a hard time to see it as a business. Maybe it's my own limitation, but seeing it as a service, it's something that, as I said, was given to you freely. I mean, in such a gracious way. The least I could do was to share back all these stories, the learnings, and hopefully they will inspire other people to continue their own journey. And I guess that makes it a very good result.
And that idea of being in service is at the heart of what we do. And then this business words, which fully respect your interpretation. And again, it comes down to, you know, everyone who's listening in, we all have our own perception of it. And, you know, I found it fascinating when I came into the coaching world, and ideas of competition and collaboration. And I remember some coaches being super secretive and quite defensive, which just doesn't align with how I operate on any level. And, you know, partly the reason why I have this podcast is, you know, very similar to why you have written your book and you have your podcast too. It's very much, you know, let's share. There's a collective wisdom, and we all have our own way of being and doing things. And actually, how can we be in service? So coaching, mentoring, there is so much need for it in the world at the moment, that we all can find our own space, and that in itself will evolve as we evolve as coaches or as mentors. But just segueing slightly to your podcast project, and it would be fascinating to just hear a little bit about that, because it's quite different, the focus, I understand.
Yes, actually, absolutely correct. Anna-Marie, just before I answer about the podcast, let me just tell you one thing connected with still the previous point. You cannot copy the heart of another person. It's not possible. You can copy everything, probably, but not the heart of another person. So quite often when someone approaches me and tells me, look, I would like to develop something similar to walking mentorship, my answer is always the same. You follow your heart. That's always correct, because no one will be able to copy that. It's impossible. It's impossible. So I think that's the key thing. This might be the dumbest idea ever in my life, which I don't think so, by the way. I had others. This one is definitely not the dumbest. But for sure, this is my essence. So it's absolutely 100% correct. I mean, when you follow your heart, you're never wrong. It's impossible. Absolutely. Going to the podcast, I have to tell you that in the very first weeks of the pandemic in 2020, me and my partner were very bored because we couldn't go anywhere. We were forbidden to go outdoors, go figure. I mean, the healthiest thing you can ever, but yeah, at least here where we live, there was a lot of creativity on some lawmakers. But anyway, so we were at home. We said, "Love, let's make the best out of this situation." And one of the things that we thought was, there are so many interesting people in the world. I mean, really, literally. And it's super weird when you just contact an interesting person and say, look, I just want to talk with you. I know that these days people can find it too funny. And we thought, no, we have a brilliant idea. We'll create a podcast that we talk with these people, we interview them, we get to know them, we talk with them for 1 hour. We can even create a format that becomes a little bit more personal. So we might ask for some musics and they explain why they choose these musics. And then my partner asked, but look, who is going to be interested in listening to these things? I say, well, I know at least two, you and me. So this is how everything started. We are very curious people. We love to ask questions, by the way. And we love to listen and learn. So this is the basis. And we noticed that we start literally with zero, right? And over the years, because it's already, I think, our 3rd year, we kind of try to interview a person every month. When I say kind of try, because sometimes not possible, but we don't make it a religion. So we do it as we go. We have met the most incredible human beings. I mean, this is absolutely extraordinary. And what I found the most incredible thing is that, you know, you read a book, you try to find this person on LinkedIn, you send a message and say, look, I read your book, I love it, we'd love to interview on your podcast. This person replies after 10 minutes, hey, great, I would love to do so. I mean, we chose again, the world is just full of amazing, good people. Actually, the more I walk with people, the more convinced that the vast majority, I mean, I'm talking about really the vast majority of the planet, it's amazing people. Yes, there are some people that I don't know, we need to pray for them. I mean, they are a little bit off the road, but look, let's not lose hope there. But the majority, it's really good everywhere, all nations, all backgrounds. This is what I've seen. So the podcast is an amazing way to keep talking with amazing people. And that's actually now it's a little bit more because we have already a few thousand people listening to it. And the feedback we receive is that this is so useful because we always have a very different person in every episode because there is not like a specific angle. But the angle is more or less this. I mean, we always try to bring the professional and the personal side together. And that's why probably music makes a good bridge in between. We let people talk, which is something that people really enjoy. I think in our podcast, we don't interrupt. And by the way, you do an amazing job here. You're not trying to prove anything. So this is really amazing and a pleasure for myself to be here. And actually, we already had feedback of people telling us, look, listening to this person, listening to this specific idea, it had an impact and changed my life. So look, we'll continue to do so because it's perfect setting. I mean, the effort is, very limited because we do it once a month, probably. We continue to meet incredible people and we put these people somehow available for others to meet them. So we work a little bit as a bridge. And the name of the podcast is simple, Keep Walking With Me. I mean, you can read it in any possible way.
Wow, that's so great. It's good. And I can declare that I have listened to a few of them and they are absolutely fantastic, Joao. So, you know, congratulations, and you're doing such a great job with them. And look, I think what's clear that I'm hearing is interesting people, of which I've had the pleasure of meeting you today. You are undoubtedly a highly interesting person, attract highly interesting people, and your curiosity, there's just this real pattern that I'm picking up. You're in service of others. You just want to showcase, talk to interesting people, be curious, and there's that sort of world citizen in you, connecting people all over the world, finding interesting people and sharing stories. And you know what, if that's what that podcast sums up, that is what it is. It's super good, and you should be very, very proud of the work. This coming towards, as we're coming towards some of the end of our time, but what we're really keen to know is, and we're going to go into your imagination and some visioning for you, is where are you going to take walking mentorship and some of those practices, or where's it all going next in the future, if you're able to sort of vision that?
Well, one thing we know is that we don't know much. That's a good starting point, because we never get bored, taking this into account. But we also see that today the walking mentorship is in a very stable, let's say, service that we provide to individuals and to organizations. We operate all around Europe, just in Europe. And actually, recently, we launched a certification program, because for many years we had this terrible dilemma. I mean, people would approach and say, look, I would like to replicate this in my country. How can I do it? But we didn't have a good answer. So the answer was, look, we don't have a good answer at the moment, but, leave us your contact and we'll get back. And which we did in the beginning of this year. We finally mapped out a series of workshops and boot camps that can create the conditions that you can start the process on your own in your country. Because look, we don't have any ambition to make a multinational out of this service, or create I don't know, some whatever you want to call it, because that is not there. But there is definitely an interest to make the programs more available in a way that we can be proud and assure that what is being given is similar to what we give here. So we have our, let's say, first mentees going through the process at the moment, which is amazing. They will go back to their countries where they will continue this practice. So I think that the objective, actually, it's continued to be more or less the same, is to continue day by day enjoying this journey. I know this sounds super simplistic, but this is the most powerful thing, actually, I can even dare to say. This is the objective, is enjoy the journey, the challenges, I mean, and we have them plenty, then find ways to solve them, which is an extraordinary experience, to solve challenges, and feel that every day you are living your life. I mean, this is the plan, because as far as we do this, actually, we are always one step closer to this best version of ourselves. And by doing that with other people, we just make it more accessible, more flexible, more tangible. The book actually also came out last year to help a little bit support this process. But yes, this is definitely not a franchise type of thing. I mean, it's not, because each one of these persons will become, by their own merit, a mentor, meaning that they're following their heart. It's not replicable. You cannot copy. They just have a framework that honestly can save a lot of time. Yes, because there's a lot of learnings behind this. But that's the plan. I think this is the plan. Yeah.
Interesting. So anyone who would like to find out more, there seems to be a framework there, maybe calling out. And it is, the coaching training world it's a bit of a dark side to the coaching world. You can spend a lot of money on coach education. And there's lots of courses, I don't know, get hounded on LinkedIn by, attract clients, generate, big figure businesses, blah, blah, blah. And it's having that ability to kind of dial it back and really know who you are and who you are as a coach or as a mentor. But every little help along the way does help, which is why podcasts like this, podcasts like your own, your book, is all part of the learning journey from others. So if our listeners were keen to find out more, where could they do that to get in touch?
I think there are two ways that are more stable. I'll try to explain. We have a website that is pretty much updated with new programs and dates and so on. But almost every month, I say almost because sometimes it takes a bit longer, we have a newsletter that comes out and somehow shares a little bit, the people we interview on the podcast, the programs we've done in the past, so you can look at some videos. Usually we do some short videos that can illustrate a little bit the mood and the feeling. Usually there is this theme, because our newsletter comes, it's called Kilometer Zero, and it's always a picture, and it says like one picture, one story. So actually there's always a little story that is related with the picture. And that usually it's a little bit of a kind of an invitation to continue to walk with us. So I believe that either through the website or through the newsletter, which you can subscribe on the website, you kind of get access to pretty much everything we do. We have a very, I would say, on and off presence of social media. I'll try to explain, because when we are out in programs, there's so much beauty to share. And sometimes I believe people get annoyed because I think there are some rules for posting that we don't follow. So we imagine that in one day, we just love these 10 pictures and we make 10 posts and they go like do. And but I don't think anyone complained so far, but I'm sure this is breaking some special rule of social media. And sometimes we can be, a couple of weeks silent because maybe we are doing something else. We try to use social media really as a way to walk with us. And by the way, let me just share, if you allow me, one quick story. It was already a few years ago. I was doing a program in the Alps, and I don't know why I had this crazy idea of sharing literally the road with people on social media. So I would pick up my phone and I would tape, I don't know, 10, 15, 20, 30 minutes, just the road in front of me. I really thought that was interesting. So I would just put it out and say, look, today we walk from here to there, and this is the road. And after 3, 4, 5 days, that was taking me a lot of work, especially in the end of the day when I was tired, everybody's resting and I'm doing social media posts. And after 4 days, I thought, oh, come on, no one in life is interested in this. So on the next day, I didn't do anything. So I didn't post anything. The following day, I got a message in one of these platforms from a person that I had no idea who was she. This lady asked me, is everything okay? And I thought, but who are you? And then she explained, look, I walk with you. And from where I am, which I understood later on, she was in the hospital and she had cancer, and she literally was walking with us from her bed. And after that day, I thought, never, ever, Joao, never underestimate the power of sharing something with your open heart. Never, because it's not up to you to make any judgments. And fortunately, I think 2 years later, I met this lady, personal face-to-face. She recovered from cancer and she's walking. So what I wanted to say really about this is that whatever you do or whatever you don't matters, but then it's up to you to decide. And this is where probably life becomes so much more interesting, because at any single moment you can make the decision, say something, don't say something, do something, don't do it, because you really have this notion that you are part of this whole incredible scheme of the universe, in whatever size, in your town, village, in the middle of the forest, but you are part of it. It's not, and that decision is not up to others to take. That's your decision. It's your responsibility. And then once you decide to do something, you just enjoy, because, it's you.
And that is just a really amazing story to finish on, and the impact that
beautiful
each of us can have. And sometimes you may not be getting that feedback in the moment, though actually there's that beauty that you just don't know how many people you touch sometimes.
Yes.
So no, that's amazing. And super conscious of time for today. Thank you so much for being so generous with sharing your experience, your knowledge, and your story. It's been an absolute pleasure to spend this time in conversation with you. Thank you.
Thank you.
And for our listeners, go check out these various resources and find out more and reach out, ask questions if you have any. And as ever, if we'd love to know your thoughts, what's been prompted listening to this episode, what is it inspiring you to do more or less of potentially. And this is one conversation of many. There are a whole series waiting to be discovered if you are a first-time listener. But thank you so much for taking time out of your day to listen to this conversation, and I hope that it has influenced your practice in whatever way that it has.
Thank you. It was a pleasure. Thank you. And let's keep walking.
Thank you. Thank you, Joao. It's been brilliant.
So if you enjoyed what you've heard, like it, share across your network, and subscribe to our YouTube channel and LinkedIn community page, the Coaching Outdoor Podcast. Thanks so much in advance for your support.